You had me at Jello, Jello. You had me at Jello. You had me at Jello. Oh, you had me at Jello.
Hello, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday. Almost time to practice all weekend long. But first, another episode of Cello Chat. And I'm thrilled to have with me today Jonathan Ruck, Professor Ruck of University of Oklahoma. How are you doing, Jonathan?
Very well. Thanks for having me, Benjamin. It's wonderful to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Would you tell our viewers about yourself, your musical background, even what drew you to the cello in the first place?
Sure, yes, of course. Well, I grew up in a musical family. I was born in Wisconsin, not too far from where you are now, in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Both of my parents were professional musicians, and it was just sort of something that we did, starting from a very early age. I actually began on the violin when I was 3 years old in a Suzuki program in Waukesha. And I don't think I was a particularly good Suzuki violin student, maybe for a couple of reasons. My older brother is a fantastic violinist, and I think there was probably some sibling rivalry there that was maybe discouraging at an early age, and that I was frustrated by that. And then I also had some, not so great eyesight as a child, and I found holding the violin to be very difficult, or at least the way I wanted to hold it was not the way my teachers wanted me to hold it, and that also was very frustrating for me. And so, a long story short, I didn't last particularly long on the violin. I think I stuck it through, or was forced to stick it through until about age 8 or so, at which point I took a small break, and then I started again with the cello through the public school string program. I don't actually recall how much parental oversight or encouragement there was in that choice, but I do remember, the teacher bringing all the different instruments to the classroom, and I tried the cello, and I guess I thought that would be something I could try again. And so I started in the public schools on the cello, and very shortly thereafter started working with a fantastic private teacher in Brookfield, Wisconsin, named Suzanne Hayworth. I have wonderful memories of her, and later studied with Scott Tisdall, associate principal cellist in Milwaukee Symphony. So that was really my foundation in Wisconsin. Did a lot of things, had a wonderful time playing in the Milwaukee Youth Symphony, was already playing a lot of chamber music as a high school student and things like that. And so that sort of laid the groundwork for everything that would happen later.
Right. And then your schooling.
My schooling, well, I went to Indiana University, Jacobs School of Music, for all 3 of my degrees, which is a bit odd, but it's such a big place, and I studied with a number of different teachers there during my time, and so in some ways it felt like going to different schools over the course of my time there. I did my undergraduate with Tsuyoshi Tsutsumi, fantastic cellist, and then did my master's degree with Janos Starker, was his teaching assistant for a number of years, 2 or 3 years, I think. And then, for the kind of tail end of my studies, I actually went back and did some more work with Mr. Tsutsumi, which was a nice sort of cap to my studies there.
All right. And now and you didn't go directly from there to University of Oklahoma.
I did, actually. Like many people who jump straight out of school into a job, I actually hadn't even completed my doctoral studies yet, and there was a 1-year position open here at the University of Oklahoma, and I thought it was going to be sort of a 1-year experience, and then I would go back and finish my degree, and now it's 16 years later, and here I am still, and so that's sort of the way life goes sometimes, but I'm very, very fortunate and feel very lucky to have ended up here.
Terrific. And on the journey in between, not only teaching assistant, but also concerto competition winner and chamber music competition winner, not easy feats. So hats off to you for those.
Thank you.
But then in your studio at University of Oklahoma, I'm sure you, as we all do, have a wide variety of students, types of students who have different backgrounds with their experience in cello playing, different things that brought them to the cello. So as you know, one of the main running theme of this series is motivation. So I'm curious, what are some of your favorite basically go-tos for helping to keep students motivated to keep advancing, keep practicing, keep forging ahead?
That's a wonderful question. I think every student is a little different, as you mentioned, and so part of the challenge is always sort of finding the right path with every student to figure out what best motivates them. I believe strongly in. Motivation is one way to put it, but I think also to feel that they're empowered. What I mean by that is to make sure that I'm giving them really usable information, so that when they leave a lesson, that they feel like, if we maybe haven't solved a problem in a lesson, that they kind of know what steps they might take in the practice room. Really kind of concrete, specific things about. It might be a technical idea. It might be something to explore in a piece musically. It might be, giving them an assignment to listen to a certain recording or watch a certain video related to the topic, but they actually feel like they have sort of a plan to move forward. That's just sort of on a very small scale, kind of weekly basis, I guess. And then, I think setting goals is very, very important over the course of a semester, over the course of a year. Certainly at the undergraduate level, most degrees have the recitals that sort of at the tail end of the degree. The first 2 years can be more challenging to have those concrete goals. And so we do regular studio recitals, making sure that people are kind of performing as regularly in our studio class as we can. And so I think, being forced to get out there and present something as consistently as possible is really one of the most fundamental things that any of us can do, especially when we're learning. But I think going back to that idea of having students feel empowered, I really, that's sort of the thing that I took away from János Starker the most. It's just sort of the language that surrounds cello playing and cello technique. Making sure that students really are kind of aware of what they're doing and what goes into a performance and what goes into practicing and all the possible subtleties and varieties that we explore in our music making and craft.
Excellent. I like that, empowered. And I like the focusing on goals too, because so often motivation isn't an issue in an area in which we already have a goal in mind. Well, I want to get to that goal. And it's kind of once you get to a particular goal, and if you don't then set another one, that sometimes people spin their wheels a bit. And Starker sure did have a way of, like what you say, his language of talking about these things. I remember at one of his master classes, and of course I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact wording, but he suddenly, in the process of working with the student, said something about how it can both be dangerous to look too much just about how much you have yet to go and just to focus on how far you've come. But we need that awareness of both, and he'd just say these things that have just always stuck with me. I never got to study with him, but he had as much of a genius for talking about music as he did for playing it seemed. Do you have some other kind of favorite takeaways or from Tsutsumi for that matter?
Well, yeah, I think, there's a wonderful clip of him. He said it over and over again. It's probably in his book too about but you can find it on YouTube, I think, of him just sort of talking about the progress we go through over life. This, maybe is what you're mentioning is sort of that you reach a certain point and you're now at sort of the top of a certain level, and it's time for celebration. And that's we can kind of celebrate these little mini successes, but then if you at that point realize that you're on sort of the bottom of the next level, then you have all this way left to progress, this to come. And that's and it's one of those things that you don't know how motivational it's going to be for a student or not to hear that, because I do think it takes a certain awareness that it is. I mean, many of the things that we're dealing with are lifelong pursuits, that the process never really ends. And, that might be appealing to someone and that might be kind of daunting to someone else. But I think, I think for many of us, it does sort of feel like this is a life in music that we've sort of chosen for better or worse. And that's part of the life. And it can be sort of addicting, I think, and kind of a motivating thing in and of itself. But I've always found that to be very motivational and inspirational. Just that the process never ends, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's definitely something that has come up with a number of the people I've interviewed. And I'm sure just anecdotally, even before I started this, I'm sure you know a lot of people like this as well, in which successful cellists like yourself, for whom I think your willingness to take the initiative to start something new or to go off, to forge some new ground is an outgrowth of your own motivation in music, isn't it? Is it not?
I think so. I think now more than ever, students are going to be faced with leaving school and sort of needing to forge their own path. I tell that to my students all the time, that, and I think it's, also now more than ever important for students to feel competent and, prepared to enter the profession, being able to play chamber music, being able to play in a regional orchestra, being able to teach, being able to build a private studio, being able to play recital repertoires, play concerto if they have to, if the opportunity arises. It's, I don't really know if this was ever, the case. We sort of speak about the past as if it was once easier than it is now, but I think, certainly the prospect of kind of landing that one job that's going to be the single thing that sustains you your entire life is not really, that feasible for most people entering the profession.
Well, so now in terms of your own path along these lines, you are very active as playing solo cello, chamber music, orchestral, and I'm thinking in terms of your participation in chamber music series and starting chamber music groups. Are there? Can you elaborate some on how your particular life story as a cellist has kind of led you to forge into, finding these things for yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, chamber music is my real love when it comes to performing, and the repertoire is just so fantastic. That the process of working with others, collaborating in the rehearsal process, kind of forging an interpretation, and then performing it. For me, there's nothing more rewarding. And that certainly has roots in my past. That looking back, I think that my chamber music experience as a young student was probably the most formative thing for me. The thing that, it had, if it weren't there, it's quite possible that I wouldn't have ended up being a cellist at all. I don't know. And so, that started already when I was in high school in Wisconsin. I started working with violinists who were part of Mimi Zweig's String Academy, which was then at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and we formed a string quartet that was coached by Jerry Horner, who was the violist in the Fine Arts Quartet at that time. We took it very seriously, and that was he was someone who encouraged us and pushed us a lot, and I had never really experienced anything like that before at that time, and really through that experience, I was kind of opened up to a completely different world of practicing, of music making, and it really is starting to maybe sense what it was like at the professional level to be a musician. And it's actually that quartet which brought me to Indiana University. It wasn't actually, I of course knew that the cello faculty was fantastic, but it was sort of our plan to go and study at Indiana University with Rostislav Dubinsky, the founding first violinist of the Borodin Quartet, who taught at Indiana University for a number of years. He actually passed away sort of suddenly and tragically just a few weeks before we all arrived, and so that plan didn't work out. But we had all sort of made our arrangements. I had graduated half a year early from high school to go to study there, and other people relocated to Bloomington, and so we were sort of very dedicated to this group, and that Indiana University, as many know, is a huge school. I mean, some 1,500 students, probably even bigger now or something. And the one thing you sometimes hear about that place is it's just a giant sea of students, and it's very easy to get sort of lost in the pack. And for me as an undergraduate, that quartet really is the thing that probably gave me purpose in that kind of vast sea of students. We were. I probably would have been a little lost without it, and so that we were able to win the school's competition for a string quartet, which got us out of orchestra for a year, which allowed us to rehearse very, very seriously and do international competitions and things like that. And it was something that I look back on with just extreme gratitude that I was able to experience that at that time. Because I now getting kind of more to the musical or even sort of just cellistic aspect of that, I think, there's nothing, that maybe hones our playing better than playing in a string quartet in some ways, in terms of you're able to kind of explore this incredible range of dynamic. You can play softer and more subtly in a string quartet than just about in any other ensemble. The importance of intonation is just incredibly demanding, that each person is so responsible for the sound and intonation of the group. You learn to listen to yourself in a much more critical way, and then of course experiencing the repertoire through that genre, which some of the just absolute masterpieces of all time exist within that genre. And so I think that for me, more than anything, that was the formative experience. And then, sort of sadly, that group didn't last beyond our undergraduate years. We've all sort of gone our separate ways, and we're all kind of existing in music and on our own now. But and so it's been sort of difficult to go back to string quartet for me, but I've sort of, from that really gained an appreciation, and I kind of seek out chamber music experiences whenever I can, just because I do find that to be maybe some of the most rewarding work that any of us can experience.
Excellent. And then this series, for example, Brightmusic is, am I wrong? Is that kind of the one, like Oklahoma City's answer to OK Mozart, or you know what I mean? That's
yes. I mean, so well, it's Brightmusic is a unique series within the state, in that its core members are all musicians working in Oklahoma, meaning that there are other chamber music series within the state of Oklahoma, but those are primarily bringing in preformed outside groups. Like the OK Mozart Festival, which brings in fantastic people from New York, and different string quartets every year. There's a series, Chamber Music in Oklahoma, which does sort of a similar thing year round. There's another series in Tulsa. But the idea behind Brightmusic and its founders, who were at that time faculty members here at the University of Oklahoma, at Oklahoma State University, at Oklahoma City University, and many of whom also played in the Oklahoma City Philharmonic together, which was sort of to found a series that sort of transcended any allegiances to our specific schools, or there's no sort of nothing territorial about it in any way, and so it's just people who enjoy playing chamber music coming together and presenting 6 concerts a year. And we do invite guests from the outside, but primarily it's this sort of core group that are working here in Oklahoma.
Excellent. Well, your comments about your love for chamber music, I am thinking of one of your performances that's on YouTube. I think what's coming to mind is a Beethoven sonata, in which, and see if you agree with this or not, but there are performances of just a Beethoven cello and piano sonata that are more overtly collaborative, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where they sound more like they are enjoying the chamber musicness of it, as opposed to two people playing very well and consistently with each other. But I don't know, does that make sense? Where it sounds more like they're playing with the pianist like they would play with the string quartet, where you're doing all the things you mentioned before, and also getting inside the sound, blending. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm very impressed. I remember when you brought that up with the ensemble and the sense, because ensemble is more than just being together.
Yeah, well, that if we're talking about the G minor Beethoven sonata, I think that we did during the pandemic. It seems almost like a lifetime ago, but it was back when we were all wearing masks and recording things for YouTube. It was actually a really special time in some ways. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think in some ways it brought the musical community together in really kind of beautiful ways. And I think specifically for cellists, there's just been such a nice outpouring of new content, sort of forced from this pandemic time. But going back to your question, sorry for the tangent there. Yeah, well, I really kind of dislike listening to any of my recordings, so I don't. I have to go back and hopefully hear what you're hearing. But I guess that's something I'm always striving to do. Is that to really, especially in a sonata like that, is to make it as much of an ensemble experience as you can. And especially those early sonatas, which are so, piano driven in many ways. We're just kind of a color that sort of is along for the ride much of the time.
Right. Excellent. Well, what are some of your projects that are coming up, whether concerts or summer plans? What does the rest of 2022 look like?
2022, we have here in Oklahoma City our Brightmusic Summer Festival, which is coming up early June. Playing a few more concerts with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic before that. Big projects for the summer. It's sort of nice to be back in person for some summer teaching again this summer. I'll be traveling to Fresno, California for the FUSA Festival, which is the Fresno Summer Opera and Orchestra Academy, which is a great program in Fresno. We do some very ambitious repertoire. This summer I think it's Mahler 5 with the students, and the faculty play along with the students in the orchestra. Have a lot of private lessons. It's an intense 2 weeks, but I think everyone gets a lot out of it. And then back here in Norman in the last 2 weeks of July, the program that I started and continue to direct the OU Summer String Academy. We'll be back in person for the last 2 weeks of July. It's a 2-week chamber music and solo repertoire festival. We've been canceled for the last 2 summers, which has been sort of sad, but I'm really excited to do it again. Our application deadline isn't until the end of May, and so I would like to put the word out there for any violinist, violist, and cellist still looking for a summer opportunity. Right. It's a really fantastic faculty. Students get a lot of time with the faculty, daily chamber music coachings, multiple private lessons every week. And so it's I think, hopefully we've created a place that allows students to really kind of have some concentrated growth over the summer. And so I'm really, really looking forward to that again. And the fall, I'm actually going to be on sabbatical from teaching for the first time.
All right.
Doing some performing, playing the 6th Bach suite in public for the first time, which is, it's again one of those sort of lifelong projects that I feel like I've avoided it long enough, and I should really throw myself out there and do it. And looking forward to that. That's one of the things I'll be doing in the fall, among some other things. But
that's such fun. I mean, like, even if we didn't have those 6 suites, the cello repertoire would be vast and absolutely wonderful. But thank goodness for those 6 suites too.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that sounds outstanding, and it also sounds like you won't be bored in the rest of. Well, thanks so much, Dr. Ruck. It's a real pleasure talking with you, and best of luck with all your endeavors, and best of luck to you, the viewer, both this weekend and all next week until we see you again this time next Friday. Take care in the meantime.